So good afternoon. Welcome to 1 o'clock. I kind of laughed at Stacy, and I told her, I said, you know, I'm really thrilled to be here teaching. And then she said, you're not teaching. And I said, oh, that's my other life. So my name's Tim Brueggemann, and I am a chief IT architect at Boeing. In my off time, I teach at a local university, Lindenwood University in St. Charles, Missouri. And what I'm going to talk about today is an off-take from my doctoral dissertation, which I finished in 2009. So for those latecomers, just so you know, these are my guest speakers here, so any questions that you have, if they can't answer them, I'm sorry, you're just going to have to send me an email or something. But those are from my two daughters who are 11 and 10, and both of them today told me, they said, when I talked to them before they went to school, they said, don't worry, Dad, even if you do bad, you can still come home. So hopefully that's true. So we all use the word understand every day of our life, and even though I'm talking, feel free just throughout to ask questions or whatever. I really like this to be more of a dialogue than a speech, so to speak, especially right after lunch where everybody's a little bit full, a little bit drowsy. So, but we all use the word understand. Ask yourself to define it. Can you put it into very specific terms? So if I ask you to define a quarter, you can use adjectives that will explain what that quarter looks like, what it feels like, what its size is, etc. But when we do that with understanding, it's a very abstract word. Unfortunately, we as IT professionals, we often just kind of take for granted the onus of responsibility that we have, and that is to protect the data that is stored on the organization's machines. And at a company like Boeing, the amount of data is just phenomenal. At all of your companies, think about just one application and how much, how much database size that application holds. Think about the types of data on it. So is there personally identifiable information that's stored within your application? Specifically, what I refer to as highly sensitive, personally identifiable information. There's a quote by Robert McCloskey that I like, and it says, I know you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize what you heard is not what I meant. And that is so appropriate to what it is that understanding is, because we're all going to have our own agenda or our own definition of exactly what understanding is. So organizations rely upon the collection of data and the storing of the data. That is paramount to that organization's success, not only from the day-to-day front-end systems that the organizations use, but from the back-end systems that are used every day but are not public-facing. So when we start thinking about some of those systems, HR systems, how much of the HR data has personally identifiable information on it? Highly sensitive personally identifiable information is defined as information which can be used to discern an individual's identity either alone or when combined with other pieces of information that are held in the public domain. So let's use some examples very quickly. If I told you all right now that 111223333 is my Social Security number, and I was being honest, what kind of impact could come from me just publicly announcing and giving that out? Identity theft? Yeah. What if I told you that my cell phone number is 314-503-7297? Which, by the way, it is. Any impact can come from that? Yeah, exactly. So there are implications, even for the data that we freely give out, that can come back and tie back to an individual. Think about the amount of data that we just freely give out into the public sector. When we go out on this internet thing, any of y'all been on that thing yet? No? Okay. It's new to me. But think about that. You go out, you go to Amazon, or you go to Barnes & Noble, or you go to BestBuy.com, and you want to purchase some sort of item. You go through, they don't have it in the store, or it's a click-only merchant. How do you pay for it? Well, you put your credit card information in. And many of us look, and we look at that bottom of the screen and we say, oh, well, there's a little lock down there, so it must be okay. Right? Or we look at the URL and we say, oh, it's HTTPS, so we must be okay. Well, that's not always the case. And again, it comes back to how the organization not only handles the information, but or collects the information, but how it handles the information. So access to information and data is easier. Yes?
Before you move on,
yeah.
confused as to your definition. Highly sensitive personal information.
Yes.
If I look at information from the PCI standpoint, and card number, CVV number, and etc. If I look at it from one of the 46 different breach laws in this country, it defines it under a different set of terms. If I look at it from HIPAA, I can understand that. What is your definition of highly sensitive personal information? What does it include and what doesn't include? And how do we distinguish that from NPI, which is not public information?
Right, so that's a very good question. My definition versus the 10 bajillion other definitions that are out there. So my definition is what I had on the board or on the screen here just a little bit ago. And it's any data that in combination with other private data or publicly obtained data could be used to physically identify another individual. So it is much broader than the PCI or the HIPAA or the FERPA type regulations that are out there. But the overarching umbrella, so to speak, is that if I can physically go out and use some information that I shouldn't have access to, and combine that with other data that is in the public domain to simulate or to take on your identity, it is highly sensitive, personally identifiable information. Okay, so Social Security number, a PIN number, a bank account or a credit card number, because again, that credit card number ties back to name, address, city, state, zip, yearly income, etc. Did I answer your question, or? All of those can be. So, and it's not in this presentation, but what you actually have is you have a breakdown of what is primary HSPII, or primary fields, and then secondary fields. So things like date of birth is a secondary. Passport number is a primary. Social Security, primary. Your street address is secondary. City is secondary. State is secondary. Zip is secondary. But when combined, that address information becomes primary. Okay? This is a definition that that I derived along with Solove in his paper to the American Bar Association in 97, I believe. Okay. Yes, sir. So, again, access to the information much easier. Lost or stolen laptops. And when we talk about that, I mean, these laptops that we use in the corporate environment, it used to be, you know, we went to work, we had our dumb terminal right there in front of us, we sat down, it was hardwired in, pretty much all we had was a monitor that showed us a nice little green flashing square and a keyboard, but everything else was there. We kind of migrated, and then we got the desktops, right? And then from the desktops, now we've migrated so that pretty much everybody has, from the day you walk into a company, you're issued a laptop. The problem that you have with those laptops is that individuals who want to get stuff done to meet deadlines bring those laptops or take those laptops home with them, and rather than going through the VPNs and other things that are set up to connect in when they're at home, they download the data straight onto their machines, and then they just go through and they process the data and do their job on that data straight from their machine. But so if that laptop is lost or stolen, so is all of that data. And so that increases the liability for the organization. And as the you lose one laptop, and that one lost laptop can equate to millions of dollars in what the organization has to do to offset that. Not only do they lose the laptop, but you know, they have to report it, and and when they report it, it gets out. So it not only is costing them financially, but it is out in the public eye. So it costs them from a reputation point of view as well. Challenges that face the organization, again, the increased organizational efficiency. Because we are required to do more with less. The technology continues to get better. As the technology gets better, so does the amount of data that we maintain and that we store on our systems. And the protection of highly sensitive, personally identifiable information. It is really just now coming to the forefront within the past 5 years of the amount of data and that's out there and what organizations need to do in order to protect that data. We've always looked at securing data from inside, but we've never looked at it from storing that data or protecting that data from from the laptop or the user perspective. So there are new perspectives in the organization that have grown from the increased amount of government legislation and increased public awareness. From a personal standpoint, and the reason I became very enthralled in this subject, and trust me, to do a dissertation on something like this, you have to really love the topic. I was a victim of this happening 3 times. One was through my wife, the company that she had worked for in shipping computer tapes. They had lost 2 reels of computer tapes. All of her PII information was gone. My medical records from the VA were on laptops that were stolen or lost from the VA. And then shortly after that, we got a phone. I was teaching one night at Lindenwood, and my cell phone rang. And I get a phone, and so I answered it because it was my wife. And I just told myself, sorry, and picked up the phone. And she said, yeah, I've got this guy on the other phone who says that he is from the security department of our bank. And, he's saying that there's some unauthorized activity going on our debit card. And he's asking me some questions. And so I told her right away, I said, okay, get his name, badge number, all the things that you're supposed to do, and phone number. We called, so I got the number, looked at the number she gave me, and lo and behold, it was the same number that was on the back of the card, so I felt a little bit better. Called the number, and through the TJ Maxx or the TJX data that was lost, someone had gotten our information, had actually made a fake card, went to a Walgreens over in Illinois from the Missouri side, now Walgreens, okay, not Walmart, and charged $976 worth of product. First of all, I'm thinking, what do you buy at Walgreens for $9? Anyway, so again, I have been impacted by this and have kind of gone on my little rampage from this. So when we talk about privacy, Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis in 1890 defined privacy as the right to be left alone. Pretty simple, isn't it? And really, it makes sense. The only problem with that is right now there is no one, there is no one single piece of legislation that protects an individual's privacy in this country. Did you realize that? Because everybody thinks, well, there's the Privacy Act, there's HIPAA, there's FERPA. FERPA, by the way, is the education side of it. There's the National Communication Privacy Act. There are all these things that are out there, but there's no one single piece of legislation right now. In the 60s and the 70s, Congress started to get very concerned because the amount of data that was being stored on databases. And so if we think about that from the 60s and 70s and we push that forward to now, that has more than, excuse me, has increased over 100 times the amount of data that we're storing on databases now versus the 60s and 70s. So in the 70s, the Privacy Act was enacted. We had the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, or HIPAA, Family Educational Rights Acts, FERPA, and the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, or the ECPA, that have been enacted. Some problem areas: increases in online technology. As the internet continues to grow, so does the amount of data that is freely flowing around that can be accessed. Attacks in privacy can occur in many areas. Our employment records, the internet, government databases, and different corporate databases. So my study defined the level of understanding that the IT worker had on HSPII in their organization. So I specifically focused on the IT worker, nobody else, even though everybody throughout an organization can touch the data. I focused on the IT. 4 areas were reviewed: the individual's knowledge of the HSPII program, the ascription to technology, or how technology was being used, the belief from the IT worker that the ascription to technology was appropriate and being used, and then senior management's involvement in the HSPII program. The population for this study is every IT worker that is employed by Fortune 500 companies, both inside and outside the United States. A convenience sample was taken from one large Fortune 500 company. I won't tell you their name. They have approximately 8,000 IT employees. A random sample of 10% of the IT staff was selected. And there was a minimum response rate of 260 people that was needed in order to make it a valid sample. The actual response rate was 332, or 41.5%. 6 different areas were examined. The areas were first that came out a lot smaller so I apologize. The time in information technology field that the IT worker has been, the education level of the information technology worker, the length of time at a company for the IT worker, the differences between management and non-management in the IT field, the role that the IT worker played, and what the age of the IT worker actually was. Here are some different charts as far as the response rates. So time working in IT, you can see that the majority had worked in IT more than 20 years. The formal education level, the majority of the IT workers had a bachelor's degree, second to, and then masters, and some college were right on the same level. Time with the current company, the majority had been with the same company for over 20 years. management versus non-management. So you can see that is there were 41 managers and 291 non-managers. And manager actually defined was defined as anybody that had another individual that reported to them for or that directly reported to them. And then the age of the individuals, you'll see that the majority were 50 to 59 years old, followed very closely to the 40 to 49-year-old group. And that is another very unique dynamic that has been noticed throughout this study, is that the IT professional age in the United States has continually gone upward instead of the other way around, primarily because the majority of people coming out, instead of going IT from the university level, are doing the engineering route, and then they may end up in IT, but pretty significant dynamic. And then the job, the majority were in the developer analyst role versus the other roles that were looked at. So the summary explored the understanding level by the IT professional. What we found is that as the population got older, their understanding level increased. We also found that the manager versus the non-manager, the manager had higher scores in every category than the non-management people did, which tends to suggest to us that the information itself is not flowing down to the general populace. The directives are being made and by management, and management is understanding what is going on, but they're not adequately communicating it down to the day-to-day employee. The age group of the IT professional, one of the things that was very enlightening was, again, that as the age group segments went up, not only did their understanding level go up, but their knowledge level went up. And one of the things that we can't quite put our finger on from this study is whether or not that that had a correlation or a relationship based on personal experience. So was it because the younger group are just very, very free with putting information out on the internet? I mean, you look at Facebook and a lot of these other places, and things that are out there are amazing. Or was it because that the older group had been impacted by some sort of data loss scenarios similar to what had impacted me and my family? So, unable to actually define what that correlation is. Some additional insights that were gained from the study was that there was no one right answer. And there's some additional study and additional work that I'm currently working on in order to try and bring more concrete definition to this area. Let's see. So the possibility, I'm pretty much on time too. The possibility of data loss continuously threatens the security and the availability of the IT systems and the IT resources. HSPII program has to be a reiterative process, and it must be ongoing for it to be of value. IT systems and applications have to be continually examined and evaluated. And one of the, if not the primary risk to any HSPII program is the lack of understanding of the individuals most involved with protecting the data, and that's the IT professional. And one of the things that I just couldn't resist because, I know that you have to have some humor, is we have to have a way not to protect data. And I just love this video, so I had to link it in. So this is how we don't protect our data, unless, of course, you want to make sure that no matter what you do, nobody will be able to get to the data because you've completely encrypted it in a way that no one will be able to get to it. Right? Not destroyed, but encrypted. So, any questions? And again, I know that this is very theoretical compared to many of the other presentations that you've been in, but it is again an ongoing field, and it's a field that that I believe is going to be very relevant as we go. Yes, sir.
Working for Boeing, what prompted you to look at PII versus assets? Is it just your personal experience, or?
Well, the personal experience is the main was the main factor, but also shortly after I started at Boeing, there were two laptops, and it didn't affect me. I wasn't impacted by it, but there were two laptops that within 6 weeks of each other had been lost/stolen. So, it was out there, and because of that, all of a sudden the impact on the personal side, right? Okay, what do you as an IT person, what do you have to do? And you started seeing more policies and more procedures that were flowing down from upper management for protecting the PII that's out there. Yes, ma'am.
How much do you think that trend has to do with corporate culture and training?
So which trend? The trend of?
That the older and more managers are.
So that's a good question. And the trend of management having a better understanding versus the individual, that trend is, I think it is a lot of culture, but at the same time, I think that as the culture starts to change, where we really start, and I dislike using this word because it's one of those key words, but as we start to empower the employees to make their decisions, et cetera, that it will that trend hopefully will start to shift over. But at many organizations now, it is there are other programs out there where if they see potential for data to be lost or ways to improve programs, that there are different reward programs, et cetera. So I think that it is partially culture, but I'm hoping that we start to break that culture and we start to move to a more open society where we all can look at the data, look at the programs, look at what's out there, and figure out what's best for the program. So here's a snippet, so to speak, is that because of the need to protect the data, many organizations are, and I had a friend of mine who was talking to me about this the other day, many organizations are putting their their PII data onto secured services or secured servers behind Citrix walls, et cetera, right? And so the individual, his name's Lyle. Lyle told me, he said, I'm working on this new project where we're replacing everything, and yet my management's coming down telling me that I have to spend 300 hours to migrate all of my PII data from the application that's going away over to these secured servers. And I said, well, and Lyle doesn't work at Boeing, so I said, okay, well, Lyle, how long until you replace your new system? And he said, well, it should be first quarter of next year. And I said, well, when is your deadline for moving the data? And he said, by December of this year. I said, and what's it going to cost you? And he gave me some numbers. And so for a 3-month period, we have to be smart, I guess is what I'm saying. Just if we have an application that's going away and we're bringing a new application in, whether it be through a cloud type or a COTS hosted application, we have to pay attention to what it is we're doing and make sure that that new application contains the security that is going to protect the data, and then protect the data in the existing system as best we can. Yes, ma'am.
Brings up another point. What do you do to archive or destroy the old system?
Okay, so when you're talking archiving and the data, that is a huge pot that unfortunately I don't think either of them can, either of the three up here can answer. But what you have to look at is there are government regulations behind how long you have to maintain data for different applications, et cetera. So, you still, whether you're going through Iron Mountain or whatever, right? If you're retiring an application and that you still have to maintain that data for X number of years, depending on, was it a finance application, was it an HR application, was it a military contract? Military contracts are really cool because it's 13 years from the end of the contract. So.
No regulations right now as to how to dispose of that stuff once that's up.
Once it's up, then there are yeah.
So like your average company is like, oh, bank record from whenever, toss in the dumpster. Or?
Well, I think hopefully we've gotten past that, and you see shredders as part of everyday homes now. You see, you have these companies that are storing the data now. That when it is time, they do destroy. Where the old tapes that from the mainframe systems are being burned or shredded or whatever, hopefully in an eco-friendly manner as much as possible. But yeah.
Here in Massachusetts, one of the subsets of 93H actually specifies secure disposal is actually in law. With reasonable fines, 5,000 per incident.
Right.
There are a lot of places that provide this.
Yeah. And again, depending on where you are, it's going to make a big difference. And then depending on how big is your company. Is it a global company? Is it just here in Massachusetts? Is it just in Kentucky? Whatever. Then you go through and you find out what is the highest of all of them, or try and combine to get the purebred. But again, that's why most companies go through these data storage companies, and and they handle a lot of it. So, kind of as a plug, this is a book that I am a contributor to. It's called The Refractive Thinker. It has 13 or 14 chapters. It is on Amazon. This one deals with ethics, leadership, and globalization in the workforce. $34.99 if anybody's interested. I've got 4 here with me that I'll let go at a much lower price than what you'd pay for it on Amazon. But that is my shameless plug, right? We all have to have one somewhere. Any other questions? If not, thank you, everybody. There are some questionnaires somewhere.
Please take a moment to fill out the evaluation form. It really helps us, helps teachers.
And again, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming right after lunch, et cetera. Have a great day.